I'm excited to talk today about our new, or our topic of the day is the song we just sang. It's called The Blessing. So who remembers in COVID? I feel like I heard this every single week because I did hear it every single week. So this came out right before COVID. But we're going to talk through a couple of different things that I think are so important, because when we sing songs, so many times they're focused, and most of them are focused on giving honor and glory back to God like they should be. This is the praise and worship. But every now and then, we have these songs where they're actually declarations of what God says. Because how many of you know one of the ways we can worship is through imitation? I can remember growing up, my dad was an American football coach when I was a little kid, and I wanted to be just like him. So, he would get down in the, in the good American football stance. He would sit like this, and be watching the players do something wrong. And then that's whenever, you start yelling at them, like, figure it out, whatever you may be saying. And so I would, as a 3 or 4 year old, I would go to the practice, and I would do the same thing. And then whenever he would say, come on, boys, come on. Come on, boys, come on. Come on, boys, come on. And I just wanted to do whatever he was doing. And that's actually a form of worship. And we do this all the time, right? Anything or anyone that we were like, oh, man, I respect that person or honor, or I like that, then that's someone or something that we end up actually wanting to be like. And because of that, it's a picture of worship. So what we're going to talk about today is a song that is actually from the heart of God, this song that we just sang, The Blessing. And whenever we partner with what he is saying, we're prophetically declaring something that's powerful over our lives. So turn in your Bibles to number 6. Anya's excited. Number 6. So some of you love math and you go to numbers often. Others of you don't like math and you're like, there's a book in the Bible called Numbers? What? Number 6. So this is called the high priestly prayer. Or the Aaronic blessing, because Aaron was the first priest. And so this is where this actually comes from, is this wonderful, wonderful passage. Is verse 24. So we're going to read this together. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May he lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you peace. Now, hey, that's a pretty good prayer. Who likes that prayer? I think I like every single phrase in there, Blessing, keeping me. We're going to talk about what that means in a second. His face is going to shine on me. I don't know what that means for sure, but that sounds good. He's going to be gracious. I'm going to have peace. So this is an amazing prayer, right? So this is what God, he told Aaron, he told the priest, you need to pray this over the people over and over and over again. So if you don't know anything about God, if you walked in here today and this is the first time you've heard anything about God, this is what you could be convinced. If this is the prayer that you're supposed to pray over people, if this is what the priest, the spiritual leader, is supposed to say, I would be convinced that my God or this God is for me. He wants to bless you. He wants his face to shine upon you. He wants to give you peace. So we can be convinced that regardless of anything else, our God is for us. Now that's good. And we could go home just with that. Like, God is for you. So any situation in life, problems, whatever may be coming your way, you can always remember, my God is for me. So in the Jewish tradition, so the priest would come out twice a day and he would pray this prayer over the people of Israel. And so if you were walking by the temple, walking by the house of God, you would hear this prayer consistently throughout the day. What's more is the Jewish priests would specifically, they would be praying over the children. Why? Because the blessing of God goes from generation to generation to generation. It's not just for you. It's actually for those after you as well. I think that's pretty awesome that our God is not, I have just enough for you, but actually I have just enough for you, but your children need to know about it, and their children need to know. So that's what I love with this song, because it combines this knowledge together of who God is, that he wants to bless us. But then even more than that, he also wants to bless those that are coming after us, because that's who our God is. He's a God of unlimited blessing available. So for me, I think one of the things that I find challenging is definitions, because who wants the blessing of God? Okay, this is a rough room. I'm not going to lie, I'm very concerned about a lot of you. Who wants to be blessed by God? Okay, we're getting there a little bit. Man, who wants his face to shine on you? It's like, I don't know what that means, so tell me what that means. So we need to get into the definition of this, right? So we actually know what we're praying and what we're singing. So may the Lord bless you and keep you. So what does that mean? What is that saying? So the blessing of God, within the Jewish context, when you would bless someone, what you're doing is you're giving them the greatest opportunity for success. So whenever someone would go and they would bless their kids or they would bless someone else, they were saying, hey, I'm going to give you the highest, the greatest, the most opportunity that you may be successful. This is the prayer of God over your life. May he keep you. Now, what is to keep you? So it's this picture, the phrase used in this, it would be like a wall of thorns, of a thorn bush that would be put around as protection over your property. So the picture that God is trying to say is that I'm going to protect you. I'm going to put a wall around you of protection so that no one or nothing can get in. So this first phrase, what he's saying is, may God give you the greatest opportunity for success, and may he be a wall of protection around your life. If we just stopped right here with the prayer, I would say that's a pretty good thing to go out with. So over and over again, this is what the people of Israel would hear. May God give you the greatest opportunity for success. That's what you grew up as a kid knowing about God. May God protect you. May he be a wall of protection around you. May he make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. So these two phrases go together. Because his face, the picture of that is God's favor upon your life. And that only happens because he's a God full of grace. What is grace in its basic form? It's giving someone something they don't deserve because of who you are, not because of who they are. So may God be gracious to you. So there are so many things we don't deserve from God. We don't deserve Jesus. But what did he do? He came, he died on the cross. He gave his life so that we can receive the gift of reconnecting with God. He is gracious. But even beyond that, in each and every day life, his favor can be upon us. What is his favor? It's receiving blessing we don't deserve. So may God give you the greatest opportunity for success. May he protect you. May his favor, what even you're unqualified, don't deserve, be given to you because he is full of grace. This is a good prayer. No wonder God told us to pray. It's like he knows what he's doing. May he lift up his light. This is a weird phrase. May he lift up the light of his countenance upon you. Now, what does that mean? So the best way to describe it, your countenance, it would be like your very presence. So what he is saying is, may the God's very presence be with you. May it be in front of you. May he be going wherever you're going. He's going to be right there with you and give you peace. Now, when I think of the word peace, I think of this wonderful, so my wife and I, there's a place in the Polish mountains that we love going. You can talk to her later about that. She's very passionate about it. But that's kind of the picture I have of peace. You sit there on your little patio, your little balcony, and you can see the mountains. You have your coffee, or maybe it's at the beach, and everything's calm and quiet and right with the world. That's if you have 2 kids, so I'm sorry, Ben. Good luck. We'll pray for you. But that's kind of the picture I have when I think of peace. But the biblical context for peace, the way you could look at it is it's wholeness or completion. So what actually the Bible is saying is, may you be made completely whole. May you be lacking nothing. May there be complete wholeness. And how do you receive wholeness as a person? The presence of God. So may his countenance, may his very presence be here with us so that we can walk in peace. You see, when we understand that about peace, we realize that we don't have to wait for the feeling, but we can be confident with the person that's with us. That's why Paul says you can have peace that passes understanding, because you don't have to wait for the nice, calm mountain pictures, but you can be anywhere at any time because your God is with you. So this is what this prayer is getting at. And I love the story of Jacob. So Jacob is a complete mess, and he has so many problems. But what we see is this transformation that happens in Jacob's life. So if you don't know about Jacob, Jacob's one of the fathers of Israel. So you see over and over again, you see God being told the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Why? Because God's a God of generations, not one specific person. So Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. So Jacob was the son of Isaac, but he had a twin. Does anyone know his twin's name? Esau. I don't know what he's saying. So we're in English, man. So he had a twin named Esau. Now, Esau and Jacob were complete opposites, but Esau was born first. So in Jewish tradition, that meant that you would receive a double portion, extra blessing, and all of these things that come with being the firstborn. So he was going to get that. But Jacob, which the word Jacob means the deceiver, or to deceive, he decided he was going to steal and trick his father into blessing him with the firstborn blessing. So as you can imagine, stealing your brother's blessing created a little bit of tension in the relationship. So Esau, who wasn't a nice person to begin with, now was extremely mad at Jacob and was ready to kill him. So Jacob escapes to go and see his uncle. And on the journey, Jacob lays down one night. He's alone. He has nothing really. And he falls asleep. And he has this dream. And in this dream, he has this vision from God. So it's this picture of this ladder. You may have heard of Jacob's ladder. This is where this story comes. I think it's Genesis 29. And you see that there's angels ascending and descending from heaven there in that moment. And God speaks to Jacob. And he says, Jacob, I'm going to be with you. I'm going to bless you. Wherever you go, whatever you do, my hand, my grace, my favor is going to be upon you. And from you, Jacob, your offspring, your descendants will be a mighty nation. And all the families, God uses the word families, so not just nations, but families of the earth will be blessed. So we ultimately see that in Jesus. But you see this promise that happens in Jacob's life. And so Jacob, he wakes up. It's a pretty good vision. He probably writes it down in his journal. It's like, I'm going to write this down for later. And so years later, he goes, and you begin to see the favor of God that's begun to happen in his life. You see over and over again, he is blessed. He gets married. You can read those stories because they're a little interesting during that time. But he gets married. He has a big family, 11 sons. He has huge amounts of sheep. He has servants. So you see the promise of God that was given to him is beginning to come to pass. And the blessing and favor of God has been upon Jacob up until this time. And now he reaches a point. We're talking 50, 60 years later in his life. They lived a little longer back then. So he decides he's going to return back to his home, where he's originally from. But to do that, he has a problem. he's got to cross the land of Esau. Now, you can imagine him and Esau have not been sending Christmas cards to each other. There's not been friendly family visits, no family reunion plans. So they haven't spoken to each other in decades. And Jacob's in this point where he's like, I don't know what's going to happen, but it's probably going to be bad. So here's what I'm going to do. They reach up to the river. On the other side is Esau's land. So what does he do as the fearless leader that Jacob is? He takes everything he has, all the blessing that he has, and he puts it into two different groups. And he puts them across the river already. And this is his thinking. If Esau comes, maybe he will take away one of the two, and I can escape with the other one. That's the fearless leader, Jacob, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is the story of Jacob, the fearless leader. Two groups. Can you imagine being his kids? I'm like, hopefully we both don't get taken tomorrow. And what's more, he puts them across the river, and then he stays alone by himself once again. Now, here's the thing about the blessing of God. How many of us, when we think of being blessed, of God blessing us, do we kind of have this picture of walking into God's Galleria? And it's like, oh, hey, I'm going to take my shopping cart, and I'm going to go shopping through the blessing of God. I'm going to take the nice job. I'm going to take the nice house. I'm going to take this. I'm going to take the nice family. I'm going to take whatever it may be in our lives. It's like, oh, I'm going to walk through God's Galleria and do a little shopping for the blessings that I want. And then I'm going to take these things home. And these are going to be great things to protect me from the world around me. It's be great things to insulate me so I don't have to deal with the problems of the world or the things going on in the world. So I'm going to just put them up here so that I don't have to deal with anything going on in the world because it's not going well. We haven't been on talking terms sometimes in the world, right? But if we treat God's blessing like that, we're probably going to end up being like Jacob. Because here's the thing you need to understand about God's blessing. It's responsibility. Blessing always requires responsibility. Here's something that's even more uncomfortable. We want the favor of God, right? Now everyone's scared, oh no, what's he about to say next? No one raised their hand. I had a couple of yeahs up front. So I want the favor of God. But here's the thing about favor. You don't deserve it. Which means you're not qualified. Which means it's not a salary. It's not God's salary for your good work, Christina. It's not, oh, hey, you did a great job worshiping, so here's the salary. It's receiving something you don't deserve except for the only reason that you have Father God. That sounds awesome until you receive the favor and you're like, oh man, I don't deserve this. What do I do? We're going to actually probably find ourselves a lot like Jacob. You see, Jacob's been shopping up until this time in God's Galleria. And he's built a nice world for himself. He's got his family. He's got all his stuff, all his sheep, all of the things. But here we find Jacob trying to protect himself with his blessing and escape with whatever he can keep. God, don't take it all from me, just, whatever it may be. I just want at least a little bit of that. And here he is, once again, alone, scared. And he actually reaches a point that night in Genesis 32 where he wrestles with God. If we think that God's blessing is just to protect us from the world or just to keep us from the world so we don't have to deal with the world's problems, then probably we're going to be in the same place. We're going to be scared, we're going to feel alone, and we're probably going to want to wrestle with God because, God, I don't feel like this is what I signed up for. You said you're going to bless me, and here I am frustrated, once again, afraid of what's out there. And all night, Jacob and God wrestle. Hours. There was no go to your corner, take a break, rest. For hours, Jacob and God wrestle. And day is coming. And God says, let me go. And listen to the response of Jacob. So this is one of the best pictures of faith. He says, I will not let you go until you bless me. I will not let you go until you bless me. And it's in this moment that everything for Jacob and his children and his children's children change. Because he makes this statement. God makes this statement. You will no longer be called Jacob, the trickster, the deceiver, the crafty one that gets what he wants for him. You will be called Israel, one that can strive with God, that can stand face to face with God. You see, in that moment, Jacob's identity changed. It shifted. And listen to what actually he named it. Peniel. Turn to your neighbor and say Peniel. Genesis 32. You can read it later. What does that mean? It means face to face with God. May his face shine upon you. What happens when his face shines upon you? The identity shifted. And all of a sudden, something changed in Jacob's life. Because I know he felt guilty for everything he had that he had stolen from Esau. I know he knew he didn't deserve his life that he had. So that's why he was just trying to escape with whatever he could escape from. But when he realized that the greatest blessing he had was not the blessing of God, but that God himself was face to face with him, it shifted everything. That's why today we no longer call the people of Israel Jacobites. They're not Jacobites, right? They're Israelites. Why? Because they're not the tricksters, the deceivers. No, the identity shifted in that moment. There are people that could stand face to face with God. So here's Jacob moving forward the next day, and he puts both of his camps together. He puts everyone together. And instead of hiding behind the blessing, instead of saying, you know what, this is to keep me protected from the world, from the problems that I've created. You see Jacob, who because of wrestling with God now walks with a limp. You see, blessing always requires sacrifice. Because he walks with the limp, humbled, but knowing who he is, and more importantly, who his God is. He realized what blessing was all about, what the favor of God was all about. It was not so he could be comfortable and have this nice, soft life, but it was actually so that he could be a channel for the blessing of God to flow through the world. And whenever he realized that and there was a shift, he didn't have to hide behind what God had given him because he knew that God was unlimited. And he could now boldly walk in front, knowing that what was behind him was not just for him, but for the next generation and the next and the next. It's the identity shift. Do you feel kind of like Jacob did probably that night? It's like, God, this hasn't turned out how I thought. The blessings, my shopping at God's Galleria, I wanted to return some because I didn't realize what I was getting into. There's so many times I'm like that. Like, God, I prayed for this. Has anyone had this? Let's just have a real moment. Has anyone prayed for God to do something in your life? Then he does it, and then you're like, oh my gosh, this is a lot harder than I thought. Can you take, where's the refund policy on this? Is it just, okay, thank you. There's front row. Oh, man. God, where? But if we've been out there and we've just trying to go through life where I want you to bless me, God, so that I can have this nice, comfortable, easy life. What we're going to find is we're going to find ourselves like Jacob. We're going to still be afraid. We're going to be worried that God's not going to keep blessing us because we think he's temporary, or I don't know, that his budget is limited. And we're going to want to wrestle with him out of frustration. But the identity of Jacob becoming Israel allowed for the blessing of God to flow, not just to Jacob, but through him. And now we know them as the Israelites. And from there, Jesus came. And for generation after generation after generation, God's blessing has blessed every family, or is moving towards blessing every family on earth.